Hello farmers and aspiring farmers, thank you for tuning into yet another informative edition of your program. This is Agricultural New Directions Agribusiness in support of Vision 2030, where we equip each other with knowledge to understand how we can undertake our agricultural enterprises here in Zimbabwe. We are talking of becoming an upper middle class economy by year 2030, and one important pillar in this whole setup is agriculture. We are going to be talking about how you are viable and sustainable in our agricultural enterprises as farmers here in Zimbabwe. Now, in this very episode, as you can see, we are standing in front of seed potato. We are going to be looking at seed potato production and even commercial potato production, which some other people might want to refer to as table potato production here in Zimbabwe. To discuss this, and why I've taken the liberty of inviting Dr. Zingai Rukuni. He is an agronomist here at Kutsaga. Dr. Rukuni, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
As we get into our discussion, can you maybe enlighten our audience there at home, those who are watching, in terms of maybe a brief synopsis, a brief background of the seed that we are standing with right here, in terms of varieties and maybe your packaging? What is it like? Emphasizing on varieties that you have here.
Okay, yes. I would like to highlight that we have two varieties. We have Diamond and Hemis. Diamond is mostly table potato, but it can also be used in the processing industry, whereas Hemis is exclusively a processing variety.
Okay. Dr. Rukuni, you would find that many people are interested in producing potatoes, given that to some extent it can be an all-year crop if done in regions that support its production. Before we go on to the fertilization, irrigation and stuff, can you talk to us in terms of maybe how many kilograms are you looking at to produce a hectare of potatoes, in terms of also the yield or the plant population per hectare, which then leads to the yield per hectare that a farmer can expect?
Okay, the plant population for potatoes, the recommended plant population is 37,000 plants for a hectare. And what you need to do is, if you are aiming at large tubers, you may want to slightly reduce the plant population. But if you are aiming at smaller tubers, you might want to increase the plant population above the 37,000. I think the other thing we should be looking at is if you want to grow nice seed potato or whey potato, what you have to do is to get your soils tested first. And from the testing results, you'll get your fertilizer and lab recommendations so that you can correct your pH and apply the right levels of fertilization in terms of your nitrogen, the phosphate, and the potassium. What you need to do is to also guard against diseases, insects, the other pests, because these can be detrimental. For one of the most troublesome pests is the potato tuber moth. So you should ensure that your seed is certified, because if it is certified, it will be free of the tuber moth. Yields will vary a lot, but the Diamond potentially it's got a yield of 40 to 60 tons per hectare under irrigation, and the Hemis will be slightly lower, maybe a 35 to 40, because the processing varieties yield lower than the table potatoes. In terms of how many pockets you need, it depends on the tuber size. But because the potatoes are different, they will be different in numbers. In terms of the pockets, we sell the seed in 25 kg pockets. And each 25 kg pocket will be different from the other if the seed size is depending on whether the seed size is small or large. But on average, you are looking at 80 to 100 pockets.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, Dr. Rukuni, you would find that in our various geographical locations, kune zvakawanda zviri kuitwa nevarimi. Vamwe pavanodyara mapotatoes amenoti kusevhera here kana kudi potato roro rinochekwa into quarters. Can you talk to us in terms of planting, establishing potatoes? Kune vasiri kutoziva kuti zvinodyarwa sei. You'd find that on our various social media platforms, when we do episodes like this ones, there are always questions emanating from interested farmers. In terms of planting, what are we looking at? Roughly your recommendations in terms of spacing, in-row, inter-row, what are we looking at?
Okay, in terms of the inter-row spacing, you're looking at 90 centimeters between rows, and in row, you're looking at 30 centimeters in the row. In the question about cutting seed pieces so that we can have more, yes, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, because the cut pieces are vulnerable to rots. So you need special treatment after cutting, like laying them in the sun so that the wounds can heal. But potentially also you reduce the number of stems per planting station. because the more stems we have from each tuber, the better the yield.
Dr. Rukuni, there are people who are saying that in our agronomic field, as agronomists, when you look at your potato, one seed potato, the number of homes, what some people might refer to as sprouts,
yes,
is that which is responsible for your yield.
Yes.
So to our farmers who are watching, how do you ensure that one potato has a lot of sprouts? How can he achieve that?
Okay. Potentially each tuber is good about 11 to 15 eyes, say on average 12, and the more of those eyes produce sprouts, the better your yield, because each stem can actually produce 4 to 6 tubers. So from each tuber, if you can get at least 4 stems, it means you can get up to 24 tubers per plant, per planting station. Yes.
As we round off this segment, Dr. Rukuni, there are farmers who are into table potato production, whilst we also have those who are into seed potato production. Just as we round off, can you highlight some of the differences that are there between producing seed potato and table potato, if there are any difference, that is?
The major difference between the seed potato crop and the wet potato crop is the inspections that are mandated by government. As a seed association, we've got internal inspectors which help growers do the right thing in terms of the agronomy and the spraying of for diseases and pests, and it's all monitored. The government is also to come and inspect our crops. That is the certification process. If they are not happy with the crop and everything in the crop, they just reject the crop. Then it can be sold as a table potato. Yes. Otherwise, is the inspections and the certification scheme that is important. And we urge all growers to buy certified seed, because if seed is not certified, there are chances anything can happen, from rotting of tubers when planted to transmission of nematodes and other diseases that are normally prevalent in uninspected tubers.
Could you maybe talk to our audience there at home, those that might say seed potato has more money, you fetch higher profit margins as compared to table potato? Is it true?
Yes, it's true that the seed potato fetches more money, because in seed potatoes most of the weight is actually sold if it's good potato, whereas when you go to table potatoes, the smaller the tubers, the less money you get. But in terms of the seed potato, you 25 kgs of small tubers and 25 kgs of large tubers, the money is the same.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rukuni. That was very detailed. On that note, viewers, we have come to the end of the first segment, where we're looking at the maybe nitty-gritties of producing seed potato or table potato here in Zimbabwe. We're going to go on a short commercial break. We'll be right back with this and more in the second segment. Stay tuned. Thank you, Zimbabwe, for staying tuned to Agricultural New Directions, Agribusiness in support of Vision 2030. We are here in the second segment of your program, where we are looking at potato production here in Zimbabwe. Now, viewers, we encourage you to be a part of these conversations. Feel free to get in touch with the producer, Wazanai Manyore. It's on 0772-807-506. Alternatively, you can like our Facebook page, Agribusiness with Wazanai. Leave your comments and suggestions. They are most welcome to us on our YouTube channel, Agribusiness with Wazanai. We are also now available on Twitter, where most of these discussions do take place. It's at Agribusiness 110. Now, earlier on, before into the break, Dr. Rukuni here was telling us in terms of potato production how to plant. You can either cut, but you risk having rots within your rows and within your crop. Now we are going to be taking it a notch up and looking at how well you can take care of your seed potato after purchasing it. Dr. Rukuni, we are here in the second segment. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Now, Dr. Rukuni, how long can a farmer have their seed potato after purchasing it? We understand that in other crops, if you look at cotton production or soybean production, there are issues whereby they'll say, now your seed is dormant, you cannot produce it or use it for production this year. You might have to throw it away or use it for other purposes. When it comes to potato production, what are we looking at? The length in period when you can say this seed is still viable, I can still establish it.
Okay, for seed potato, we are looking at the storage conditions. If you buy certified seed, it will be good seed, and it's up to you to store it properly. If you store it in a cool, dry place, the seed potato can last long, and better still if it's in a cold room, it can last up to 12 months before it gets spoiled. So when you buy your seed potato, make sure that it's in an insect-proof place, which is cool, and you can also be able to fumigate it in case you get a bit of a tuber moth outbreak.
Okay. Now, Dr. Rukuni, we also have farmers in our society who are always eager on cutting corners. Some might end up getting seed potato from seed potato, purchasing uncertified seed. Talk to our Zimbabwean farmer in terms of that. What are some of the risks that they are likely to run into if they purchase their seed from either kana kumbare cheko ngona munhu akamira ari kutoti iyi seed potato okusa kubva pamsika munhu atoti iyi seed potato? What are some of the risks that they are likely to run into if you purchase your seed from uncertified producers?
The biggest risk is planting seed potato which is already infected, and one major culprit is nematodes. Once you plant seed with nematodes, you are going to multiply those nematodes and you are going to leave them in the soil, and your yield will not be marketable because it will be having lots of these bumps and things like that, which are nematode infestation. Also, you could actually buy tubers with already infected with tuber moth. So when you plant and your plants start growing, you just get your tuber moth infestation. That will ruin the foliage and the new tubers and everything. And also the other problem is you can get seed that is infected with the bacterial wilt, which is a very devastating disease, because once you get it, you also leave it in your field, which means you will have that problem continuously. So that's the biggest reason why you should buy certified seed.
Looking at our farming community, we have farmers maybe with a small piece of land who might end up running the risk of having potatoes season in, season out, a crop rotation, and they might run problems, nematodes, like what you were saying. In terms of nematode treatment, or how can you curb the risk of having nematodes within your soil? And even there are situations whereby a farmer is doing tobacco at the same time he's also doing potatoes or tomatoes, but these things are in the same family. For such a farmer, what would you recommend? What would be your word of advice in terms of ensuring that potato rake is protected from whatever is nobva kufodya kana kuma tomatoes?
In the first place, what we recommend is a crop rotation. You should not plant potatoes where you have just removed a related crop like tomatoes, tobacco, pepper, and things like that. That actually, the rotation will actually break the disease and pest cycle, so that you can get a better yield. You should plant unrelated crops which are in different families, so that you get that break. So when you come in with your next potato crop, your yields will not be affected by these pests.
Now let us talk about fertilizer. I understand that those who are taking notes are eager to know, in terms of fertilizer, what are we looking at per hectare? Just a rough draft of what you are looking at per hectare.
Okay. As a rough guide, we now have too many fertilizers that are recommended for potato. There are so many companies are selling fertilizers, potato blend and things like that. But traditionally we used to just have compound C and compound S being used for potatoes. And if you are using compound C, I would say the general recommendation will be about 2,000 kgs per hectare. But what I recommend growers to do is to take their soil samples to a soil testing lab. We test your soils and then we recommend the amount of fertilizer that you apply depending on which type of fertilizers in terms of your nitrogen, phosphate and potassium content, what is normally referred to as NPK.
In terms of irrigation, your water application regimen or systems, what are we looking at for potatoes? Even weekly, what is supposed to be done weekly? The requirements in millimeters per week, or even the mode of irrigation that should say that this is effective. We have drip irrigation, we have overhead irrigation in terms of pivot sprinklers. What are we looking at in terms of the technique that you are using, and also the required amounts per period, per given period?
Okay, in terms of irrigation, like any other crop, the irrigation requirements differ from planting up to harvest. The planting phase requires you to have your soil moist, but not too wet because the tubers may rot. So you require less millimeters per week, maybe 15 to 20, depending on the clay content of your soil. But when you get to 4 weeks and above, you start requiring anything between 35 and 40 mils per irrigation cycle. The irrigation requirements also varies depending on the clay content. If your soils are a bit sandy, you are recommended to split your irrigation so that you don't leach your fertilizers, but you should get your 35 to 40 mils in a week. Some varieties require a little bit more, and with a bit of experience, a grower would know that the soil moisture is depleted and they can add the irrigation. That irrigation is required up to the time of senescence. When you stop irrigating because your tubers are the right size, so that you can get your foliage drying and you can cure the tubers. Because if you harvest the tubers before curing, they get bruises and everything, and people don't like bruised potatoes.
Dr. Rukuni, generally at times in tuber production, be it sweet potatoes and even potatoes, we encounter a nuisance called bongwe. Pakamira say at times, just an observation, I had once a farmer who was producing his potatoes using drip irrigation, and when it came to harvesting, most of his potatoes angaka jiwa angaka ruma. Is there a relationship between the moisture of the soil, the wetness of the soil, and pongwe? Is it an adverse relationship or whatever? What is it like?
The pongwe normally is a problem with the sweet potato. With Irish potatoes, the potatoes that we eat, we are looking at, our problem is the tuber moth. Then the tuber moth is a problem normally because of exposed tubers. That's why we ask growers to always ridge and properly cover their tubers, because once they are exposed, they become green, and when they are green, they are unacceptable. And then also when they are exposed, there is very high chances of the tuber moth attacking the tubers, and that reduces the quality.
Okay, that was very detailed. On that note, viewers, we have come to the end of the second segment. We're going to go on a short commercial break. We'll be right back with this and more in that third and final segment. Stay tuned. Thank you, Zimbabwe, for staying tuned to Agricultural New Directions, Agribusiness, in support of Vision 2030, where we are equipping each other with business finance knowledge and fundamentals in terms of undertaking our enterprises within our various geographical locations here in Zimbabwe. Today, we are looking at potato production, be it seed potato or table potato. And I am joined by Dr. Zingai Rukuni, who's a specialist in enlightening us on how you can be viable in your enterprise. Dr. Rukuni, we are here in the third and final segment. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Now we are standing in front of a cold room where you have your seed potato that is being taken care of. It's well ventilated, and I can see that, and I can feel that the temperatures in here are a bit cool. In terms of the temperatures that support proper care of seed potato, what are we looking at? And can those temperatures be achieved outside for a person or a farmer who doesn't have a cold room?
Okay, yeah, first of all, the cold room is meant for keeping the seed potato for a much longer time, especially during the off-season, like winter, when most growers don't want to take potato because they are scared of the frost. So we actually have this facility to make sure that the seed is kept in condition. The facility is at around 10 degrees Celsius, and that should keep the seed fresh for the next 12 months in the event that it's not bought. But normally after the winter, growers start coming to buy because the frost will be gone. In terms of achieving these temperatures, so, outside, some places in the Eastern Highlands, they do have temperatures as low as 10-15 degrees, which can also promote the longevity of the seed in storage. But when it gets hot, the things change, and rots will be prevalent because of the sweating of the tubers.
Now you touched on the Eastern Highlands and its cool temperatures. That led me to another fundamental question. We are looking at the agroecological zones in Zimbabwe which support potato production, and even those periods of the year that seem to support potato production. As it throughout the year, do you have periods like in tobacco where you're saying it's a summer crop only, you start establishing in September, or it can be done throughout the year? What are we looking at in terms of the agroecological zones and the periods of the year?
In general, potatoes are an all-season crop. You can grow them in winter, in summer, any time of the year. But now it depends on your area. If you're in very hot areas, like Chirezi, you should avoid planting potatoes in very hot weather. But you can also plant these potatoes in your winter. And because you don't have frost in the low veld, that is a very good optional crop if you do have irrigation. But potatoes do require irrigation, and generally they are cool temperature crops.
In terms of the pests and diseases that are nuisance in potato production, what are we looking at? And could you also cite some of the active ingredients that our farmers need to look at when purchasing chemicals as a remedy for the pests and diseases that are prevalent in potato production?
Yeah, in terms of the real names of the chemicals, we'll just give you like the active ingredients. Like you could be looking at chlorpyrifos. It's required at planting, and you also need to have a product like the active ingredients similar to oxamil for nematodes at planting. That is for you to spray in the furrow before covering the tubers. And also the other chemicals that are important when your potatoes start sprouting, emerging from the soil, you need something that will kill cutworms.
Okay.
And then after that, you need to go into your regular sprays of fungicides, especially against the early blight and later on against the late blight.
Now, Dr. Rukuni, maybe your word of advice to our potato Zimbabwean farming community, those who are into potato production, be it seed potato or even table potato, in terms of your recommendations, your word of advice, your sentiments. You do interact with these farmers daily or even periodically. What are we talking about in terms of enhancing their enterprises of potato production?
Generally, I think what the growers need to do in order to get the best yields is just do the right thing. First of all is the fertilization. Second is the pest and disease control. And then one of the most important things is the irrigation. Because potatoes require wet soils all the time, but not waterlogged. Okay.
In terms of knowledge acquisition and understanding this trade, what would you recommend for our Zimbabwean farmers? Vamwe vanowana knowledge from our WhatsApp group. Mumwe anongoti whatever that I face, I go on Google, I go on the internet. In terms of maybe having a good relationship with your organization in assisting our farmers and equipping them with the knowledge that is required for producing potatoes, what would you want to say to our audience or even our policymakers?
Okay, in terms of the guidelines for producing potatoes, I think a few seed houses have guidelines on how to produce in terms of the varieties that are available, the number of tubers that are in pockets, and the number of pockets that are required per hectare, and also they have a general recommendation on irrigation requirements and fertilizer recommendations.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rukuni. It was a pleasure having you with us today.
Thank you.
There you heard it, viewers. We are looking at potato production here in Zimbabwe. We are aiming to achieve food sovereignty and food security. And one way we can enhance our production system here in Zimbabwe is through sharing knowledge, which is one reason we have this platform, Agribusiness, in support of Vision 2030. From me, your host, Zanai Manyore. I'm also on Instagram. It's a W Manyore. And the crew behind the scenes. Have yourselves a fabulous evening. Thank you for watching.